Until recently, the European Union was a powerful economic and political force, but today, the EU is on the verge of significant transformations. The end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025 marked the decline of their power. With the advent of Trump, the association began to rapidly lose its political power in the international arena. And as for the economic component, the problems began a long time ago, but have become particularly acute in recent years. So what awaits the European Union? How will the economy grow in the future? What problems lie in wait for the Union? What changes will be made in the field of security and defense? And is it possible to fully unite into one country? Let's figure it out. Let's start with economic competitiveness and technological sovereignty. Today, the EU is facing intense global competition, especially from economically powerful powers such as the United States and China. The fact is that after the partial or complete abandonment of Russian gas in the industrial sector of European countries, there is a crisis situation due to high prices for this very gas. Over the past few years, its cost for industrial consumers in the European Union has been 5 times higher than in the United States, and 30% more than in China. This has had a greater impact on the competitiveness of European enterprises. Many EU industries have had to reduce their production, and some factories have shut down altogether. Well, do not forget that the same 2/3 of German companies have moved their factories abroad, in particular to the United States of America. And the attractiveness of the American market for German companies is linked to business subsidies and more affordable energy resources. High gas prices also have a negative impact on the cost of electricity in the European region and indirectly affect retail food prices. At the same time, tensions in the global energy market are unlikely to decrease until 2026, which may lead to a prolongation of the crisis situation in the EU. However, there are also positive prospects for the EU economy. Thus, analysts predict further cuts in monetary policy in 2025, which may help revive the economy. Some countries such as Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain are also expected to show significant growth in 2025. As for the long-term future, the economic development of the European Union will be determined by a process of profound transformations aimed primarily at digitalization. I am sure many of you have heard that Europe is lagging far behind in this aspect, and that is why the countries of the Union are now working to create a single digital market that promotes the free exchange of data and cross-border trade. And investments in key technologies such as artificial intelligence, 5G, and cybersecurity should strengthen the competitiveness of European companies and introduce innovations into the economy. However, there are challenges in terms of infrastructure, regulation, retention, and talent acquisition, especially compared to the massive investments in the United States and China. Closer fiscal integration of the participating countries may also be another key lever for economic success. For example, a report by Mario Draghi, former president of the European Central Bank, published in September 2024, emphasized the need for annual investments of between 750 and 800 billion euros to reduce the innovation gap and finance structural change. According to him, these investments had to be secured through a combination of private and public financial instruments. And such a deepening of economic cooperation could help reduce regional inequality and create a more stable economic base. In general, the economic future of the European Union will largely be determined by its coordinated innovation and investment policies. This is the only way member states can meet the challenges. Now let's turn to the demographic problems of the EU and the problems of integration. Today, the European Union is experiencing a decline in the birth rate and an aging population. The lowest birth rates are found in Greece, Italy, Spain, Poland, Finland, and the Baltic states. And such a birth rate and the rapid aging of the population create simply huge problems for the entire European Union. See for yourself. If the number of able-bodied citizens decreases, this leads to a shortage of personnel in key sectors, such as industry, medicine, education, and technology. Because of this, Employers are forced to raise salaries in order to attract these same staff or lure them away from other industries. This leads to higher prices and lower business competitiveness. A decrease in the number of workers and consumers leads to a decrease in GDP. Consequently, fewer people are investing in real estate, taking out loans and developing businesses. And since it is often the younger generation that is more often involved in startups and technological developments due to the above circumstances, they are likely to try to realize themselves in other, more suitable countries. And their shortage slows down technological progress as a result. It should also be noted that the aging population tends to make more conservative decisions, which also hinders the adoption of necessary reforms. And I only touched on the economic consequences. As for example, the crisis of social systems, the following picture emerges. The number of pensioners is growing, but there are fewer working people who pay taxes. Because of this, the state is forced to raise the retirement age or increase taxes. And don't forget that aging citizens require more medical services, medicines, care, and social support. Therefore, countries are spending more and more money on healthcare, reducing funding for other important areas. In general, the scheme here is as simple as possible. Lower birth rate, fewer children, fewer future taxpayers. And this situation will only worsen in the future, creating a demographic trap. And the younger generation of Europeans, with a good education, realizing that they will have to support more and more pensioners every year, and the tax burden on them will only grow, prefer to leave for other countries. And believe me, the demand for young Europeans with a good education is very high. And yes, as you may have noticed, European countries have been actively hosting migrants from Africa and the Middle East since 2015, primarily to compensate for the shortage of workers. However, I already have a lot of videos on this topic on my channel, what it eventually translates into. Well, in short, there are no more workers, the burden on social support is increasing, the national composition of the population is changing, and the number of conflicts based on integration, religion, and culture is increasing. The conclusion here is simple. The decline in the birth rate and the aging of the population pose serious threats to Europe, and without active measures to address these problems, this will lead to an economic downturn, a crisis in the pension system, social tension, and political instability. This is precisely why European countries are forced to seek a balance between stimulating fertility, reforming the economy, and managing migration. Now let's touch on security and defense policy. The changing geopolitical situation, in particular, the restructuring of the United States and its rapprochement with Russia, are forcing the EU to step up its defense policy. It is planned to increase defense spending beyond the current NATO minimum level of 2% of GDP. The EU is also considering the possibility of creating common financial instruments to support defense initiatives. One of the proposals is the establishment of a rearmament bank, which will finance joint defense projects and help consolidate the efforts of member countries in this area. The EU also plans to strengthen cooperation between member states in the field of the defense industry, which will optimize costs and increase efficiency. This includes joint development, procurement, and standardization of military equipment. And these are not empty words. The European Commission has already presented a program to strengthen the defense industry, according to which 1.5 billion euros will be allocated from the EU budget from 2025 to 2027 to increase the competitiveness of the technological and industrial base of the European defense sector. One of the goals of the program is to make half of the purchases of defense systems within the bloc by 2035, refusing to purchase most of the military equipment from third countries. And given the possible reduction in US support, it is not surprising that the EU is seeking greater autonomy in defense matters. However, not everything is so smooth here either. According to the Lumberg Agency, the EU countries risk not being able to cope with the tasks of building an effective military-industrial complex independent of the United States. This is primarily due to problems with financing, bureaucracy, and fragmentation of internal supply chains. And secondly, Even apart from the fact that many defense plants need to be modernized, the European Union, being a union of different countries and not one state, initially did not have common tools for arms purchases, and it turned out that each country created its own armies and armed itself with little regard for the defense plans of the North Atlantic Alliance. And now these tools need to be created from scratch, increasing the role of pan-European institutions in the field of military industry. As for the military production that EU leaders intend to deploy in Europe, it needs such a fundamental reform that it is much easier to simply build from scratch. And therefore, all the ambitious plans of the leaders of the European Union to become one of the world's leading military powers in the coming years are likely to be postponed, at least for the medium term. And in conclusion, it is simply impossible not to mention another important problem: the political instability in Europe. At the moment, it is caused by internal crises and the strengthening of right-wing radical movements, and these factors threaten the unity and future of the Union. For example, let's take Germany. Recently, elections were held, during which the Christian Democratic Union led by Friedrich Merz won, which strengthened the centrist position in Europe. However, the rise in popularity of the far-right Alternative for Germany party has not gone away. Yes, they have now taken second place, but what will happen in the next elections is already a big question. In the future, they may receive even more support precisely due to the failures of the Christian Democratic Union. And of course, this raises concerns about Germany's future political stability. And political scientist Sami Nair openly warns about the lethal moment that the EU is currently experiencing. He fears that in the event of an EU referendum, the far-right forces could win. And this, according to him, indicates deep political instability and the growth of Euroscepticism. Although, in fact, everything does not happen just like that, and the popularity of such parties began to grow primarily due to the ineffective management activities of the previous chapters. And, by the way, the strengthening of far-right parties is observed in many EU countries, not just in Germany or France. For example, in countries such as Italy and Hungary, leaders with national agendas such as Giorgia Meloni and Viktor Orban are strengthening their positions, which ultimately leads to fragmentation in the European Union and a weakening of European solidarity. And the return of Donald Trump to the presidency of the United States of America adds uncertainty to transatlantic relations, and his policies may contribute to strengthening far-right tendencies in Europe. And this is unlikely to strengthen the unity of the EU, since the same centrist forces are likely to actively resist such trends. In general, the European Union is currently facing the challenge of maintaining its integrity and effectiveness, and it will take a lot of effort and time to overcome all these difficulties. And in my opinion, the future of the Union will ultimately depend on the decisions made and the results obtained. As for full-fledged unification into one country, I'm sorry, but I don't believe in that. Yes, by and large, it is not necessary. After all, most countries of the European Union already have no state borders. There is a single currency, the euro, and there is a common European Parliament. But if we are still talking about unification, then look, even now the countries of the Union cannot make any decision or agree on anything for many months, or even years. This clearly shows that each country has its own vision and interests, and I'm keeping silent about the many pitfalls. In addition, do not forget that other hegemonic countries do not benefit from a unified Europe, and they will do everything possible to prevent its emergence. And as always, special thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, support it with your likes, share your opinion in the comments, and subscribe to my second channel and Telegram channel. The links will be in the description. Good luck to all, and see you soon.